All right. Today we pick up with word devarim, the words, the devar, the word number 4a. Because there's subdivisions, right? So number 4 was to keep the Sabbath day holy. So 4a is Shemot, or Exodus, chapter 20, verse 9. Literally in English, it says, 6 days shall serve you, and do you all servile work you. If you think that one through, you could probably figure it out. But it starts off with Sheshet. Well, that's the number 6. Yamim. That's day, Yom in plural. Yom or Yamim, day in plural. So we've had this word in this teaching already. It's the day. The primary signification appears to be the heat of the day. That's the image behind it. High noon, if you will. A period of time, though, in Yirmiyahu or Jeremiah 31:32, it said, in the day, was God speaking, of course, in the day when I took them by the hand. That day, by the way, was 40 years. He took them from Mitzrayim, which is known as Egypt, from there through the wilderness. That was 40 years. So that was the day that God took them by the hand. The first day in Genesis could have referred to a period of time lasting hundreds of millions, hundreds of trillions, hundreds of gafrillions of years. It wouldn't have made any difference because it was a time period. It was not a 24-hour period, because you kind of have a problem with having 24-hour periods on the first day, since there wasn't a sun and a moon until the 4th day. I'm just thinking out loud here. There was no 24-hour periods. So Yom in Hebrew is a period of time. A day in Hebrew can literally be 1 minute, because that's a period of time. A day can be 24 hours because it's still a period of time. Or in this case, in Yirmiyahu, a day was 40 years. All right. The next word is ta'avod, another word that we've already had in this teaching, but it's to serve. It's to labor, to work, to do something. When it's followed by the accusative, it is of the thing to bestow labor on anything, to till a field, a vineyard, a garden, used of an artisan, those who work in flax, those who work to build cities. It is to serve, to work for another. It's used of the ministers of a king, to serve of a people, to serve God or even idols. It would be to worship God or worship the idols, but it is also to impose labor or servitude on anything. Our next word is ve'asita, and do. You will, it's and do you literally, so it's and you will do. It's properly to labor, to work about anything. Sound familiar? To make, to produce, to manufacture. So it's almost the same word, but it is not. It is a different word. So it's to manufacture, to fabricate. Used of a ship, because it's fabricated. It's manufactured. It's used of an altar. It's used of bricks, because they are fabricated. It's used of garments. It's used of a tent. It's used of God in to produce, to fabricate, if you will, the heavens and the earth. He took nothing and made something, which is pretty amazing. Humans will probably never be able to do that. I'm just thinking out loud there. To make anything, to produce it from oneself. Obviously, God created something from nothing. We think of it that way, but he created it from himself, his own ability, his own power, his own substance. Pretty neat when you think about it. It's used of cows making milk. They produce milk. It's used of the fat of the loins, instead of a man growing fat, which we won't speak of ever again. In like manner, it's used of trees that bear fruit. You know, an apple tree bears the fruit of apples, if you will. To acquire by labor, to make a living, to prepare, to make ready. So it kind of sounds like the same thing, but there is a little bit of a difference between these words. And then we have the next word is kol, which Coal is a sound-alike word because coal is spelled differently, but there's a sound-alike. We have this in English. I will meet you at 10 p.m. to eat meat, right? And both words are spelled differently, but they sound alike. Well, coal is the same way. Coal can be totality, all, everything, but it can also be voice, sound. Anyway, this one is totality. Then we follow that up with melachteha, which is servile work you, from servile work you. Properly, just its service, hence work prescribed to anyone, especially of the work of an artisan, the property or wealth of anyone, especially cattle. So if you own a lot of cattle, that's your wealth, that's your worth, that's your service, because obviously you're going to do something with those cows, right? It is from the root la'ach, which is to send a messenger, to be sent, to wait upon, to minister, a servant. So here's my translation. There's a long way to go for this little bitty translation. 6 days you shall serve and do all your servile work. 6 days you shall serve and do and perform, manufacture, produce, your servile work, whatever that happens to be. All right, so now we move on to verse 10, which is it's Devarim 4b, or Devar 4b, word 4b. Literally, it's like I said, Shemot or Exodus 20:10. Literally in English, it would say, "And day the seventh, Shabbat to Yahweh God's you, not shall take up all servile work you, and son you, and daughter you, and manservant you, and female you, and livestock you, and foreigner you, which gates you." Now you understand Hebrew is spoken properly, and I say that with a lot of confidence because almost every language on earth is spoken this way, where we'd say where they say and livestock you. English is spoken completely backwards. We would say and your livestock because we move the words around. And almost every other language in the world does it the Hebrew way, and English of course stands on its own in that we do everything backwards in our language. But anyway, as long as you know that, it'll make sense to you. But if you don't know that, you'll think some really weird things. And day the seventh, Shabbat to Yahweh. So it's a Shabbat to Yahweh, God's you. You think that made you a God. Not shall take up all service work you. And that would mean, okay, so everybody else can work. You can make everybody else work. You just can't work, right? And son you would think means that you're the son, and daughter you, got a problem there. Anyway, let's just know that they don't order their words the same way English does. So it starts off the yom. We already had this, the yamim a while ago, the days in plural. This is day in singular. So it's the day, the primary signification is of the heat of the day, high noon, if you will. And remember Yirmiyahu, where it said the day when God took them by the hand, which was a 40-year period. Don't forget that. Ha Shevi'i, that's the seventh. That's all you're really going to get at. It's a number. It's what they call an ordinal number. Okay, then you have Shabbat. Now, we've already had this word, but we'll talk about it again. It is, Shabbat is your root word. It's to rest, to keep as a day of rest. The primary idea appears to be that of to sit down, to sit still, used of men as opposite to labor. It's the opposite of labor. I think if we would think of Shabbat as the opposite of labor, it'd help us understand it a little better. When used of land, that would mean that the land is not tilled. To rest from labor, abstaining from journeying, to cease, to desist, to leave off, properly to desist from doing anything, to celebrate the Sabbath. That's followed by La Yahweh. That is the proper name of God. And yes, I do pronounce the proper name of God. Why? Because the idea of God's name being so holy that nobody but the high priest can pronounce it only one time a year inside the Holy of Holies is so ridiculous. I can't even begin to understand how anyone fell for this. If Yahweh, if saying God's name, his proper name, if that can't be done because that name itself is so holy, then you tell me, how is God's name more holy than his right hand? How is God's name more holy than his eyeball? How is God's name more holy than his nose? How is God's name more holy than the words that came from his lips? How on earth could his name be more holy than the words that came from his lips? So if his name is so holy we can't pronounce it, then the words that came from his lips are so holy we can't read them. We can't recite them. We can't know them. You see where I'm going with that? This is mind-boggling stupidity. But it came about during the Dark Ages. There are those who try to push it all the way into the first century, but I don't buy it. It's a nonsensical argument. But we do know for sure that in the Dark Ages, this is when it really caught on like wildfire. We know that in the biblical time period, foreign kings and, of all things, foreign servants knew the name of God and spoke it audibly. I mean, if you're from a foreign nation and you're a servant to somebody else and you know the name of God, you've got to know that his name was spoken in casual conversation daily all over the place for that to even be possible. So they didn't have this affinity to saying God's name in the biblical period. This comes after the fact, long after the fact, and it came about by superstitious people who no doubt didn't even speak the Hebrew language. And isn't it convenient that only the high priest, which they did not have, could speak it inside the Holy of Holies, inside the temple, which did not exist, one time a year? In other words, it was a way to say no. But what bothers me more than anything is that one of the commands, and we've already had it, was not to take God's name to vain. And literally in Hebrew it says to vain, not in vain, but to vain. Well, if God, his name is spoken almost 8,000 times in the Hebrew Bible, half the Hebrew Bible is missing. Most people don't even know that, but half the books of the Bible, they're mentioned in the Bible, the book of this and the book of that, and we've never seen them. So half of it's missing. I'm guessing God's name was used at least 8,000 times in that time, in those books as well. But what have we done? What did the Jews do by being superstitious, by being uneducated, by not knowing their own language, customs, and culture and history? They took God's name to vain, to a degree that's mind-boggling. They have literally wiped the name of God from this planet, because even though I say Yahweh, all I can say about that is it's the closest we will probably ever get to saying God's name until God himself or God sends a messenger in his place to verbally speak his name where the people on the planet Earth can hear it. We will never know for sure what his name is. So God cared enough to see to it and inspire people, if you will, to write his name down 8 to 16,000 times in a single book, and we've wiped it from this planet. Anyway, that's all I better say about that. So it's Yahweh God, to Yahweh. This is Eloheha, your God. And remember, they were not spoken of as, he did not speak of himself as your God until they said yes to his covenant. We should always keep that in mind. And it is God in plural. Does not have anything to do with the Trinity, doesn't have anything to do with the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. Doesn't have anything to do with that. Plurality in the East of the biblical period meant that God was alive. Because if you make a statue, you carve it out of wood, you carve it out of stone, you carve it out of something and pour metal into a mold and it hardens, even though that's not carved, essentially is, because you had to carve something to make that mold with. But you have this idol and you carve a happy face onto it. That idol is never going to get angry. That idol is never going to feel physical pain. It's never going to feel emotional pain. It's never going to truly be happy. It's never going to have highs. It's never going to have lows. Why? Because it is a god. It is an idol. So in singular, it's a god. That's why God is spoken of in plural, and why when God spoke about himself, he spoke in plural, because it indicated that he was a multifaceted God. He experienced joy, he experienced rage, he experienced all kinds of things. And God and man was made in that image, in that we are supposed to experience all these different things, or will experience all these things. You get it? So the plurality was of the living, not of the dead. It had nothing to do with three, because plural is two or more, not three or more. All right, then this is low, which is no, it's not. It's the negative article. It's connected to the next word. Ta'aseh, shall take up. And in this teaching, we've already had this, but again, it's to labor, to work about, it's to make, to produce by labor, to manufacture, to fabricate. It's all of those things. The thing I haven't said today, let me see if I have that in here. No, I guess I don't. Must not be important at this point. Let me look at that word again, make sure I'm looking. Yeah, it is asa. So the taking up and the lifting up. One of the examples I always like to give is where it says the waters came in and bore up the ark. It's lifting up. So they speak of laborers that way, because you pick up a hammer, you pick up a screwdriver. You know, there's lifting involved in the kind of world that this Bible was given to. Very manual world, if you will. Then we have kol again, which is totality. It means all, everything, that kind of thing. Melaha, servile work. Again, we've had this. It's service, to prescribe to anyone, if you will. It's the work of an artisan. It's the wealth of someone if it's their cattle, because it's from the root la'ach, which is to send a messenger, to be sent, to wait upon. It's a minister, a servant. Then it says ata. That's the word you, Y-O-U, you. Then it says uvin ha, and son you. That doesn't say and you are a son. That means and your son to us in English. A son, sometimes used of children of both sexes, because it's Bane, Bane, those things. They use this, because the word means children. But if you're talking about male children, sometimes it gets translated as son. That's what they mean by sometimes used of children of both sexes, because it kind of got it backwards. It is sometimes used of sons, as in masculine. It's usually used of children of both sexes because it means children. So it's used of descendants. Of course, it's used of grandchildren. It's the name of age. In other words, it's a young child. It's applied to a subject rendering obedience to a king or lord as to a father. Hence, metaphorically, a son of death is one doomed to die. Somebody who's just bent on destruction will probably die. It's as if delivered into the dominion of death. A son of stripes is doomed to stripes. Back in the biblical time, if you broke the laws of God in Israel, which at the time their only law was the law of God, and so if you broke that, if it was a small offense, they would literally take you somewhere, tie you to a pole, and whip you. So if you were a belligerent son, they called you a son of stripes, because you were the one always being drugged somewhere getting stripes. That's what they mean by that. It's, of course, used of a foster son. But the main thing you need to know about the word is it's used of a disciple, inasmuch as teachers were treated with reverence and obedience like parents, and received the title of father. The teacher did, and the student was called the son. So it is possible that the father is much younger than the son, as is the case with all of my Talmud. You guys are so much older than me. Anyway, the school of the prophets. Now, this was not a school where you went and learned to be the prophet. What they called the school of the prophets was you had the men that were the prophets, and they had students, they had Talmudim, they had followers, just like all the other rabbim had, and they called them the school of the prophets. It was not a place where you learned to be a prophet. Let's see. That's probably all we need to say about that. Then it's ubitecha, and daughter you. So now we have the word that's feminine. The daughter, it's of a granddaughter, it's of a female descendant, of a maiden, a young woman, used of foster daughters and adopted daughters, female disciples. It's number 4. It's used of female disciples. When Martha and Miriam were visited by Yeshua and his Talmudim, there was one working in the kitchen, and it said there was one sitting at his feet. That's a Hebrew idiom. If you are a Talmid of a Rabbi or a Moreh, if you're a student and you have a teacher, then they say that you are sitting at the feet of your master. You see that terminology used in the Bible. So you've got one girl here that's actually a student. She's a Talmid, or would that be Talmiyet? Anywho, you get what I'm saying. So yeah, there were females that were actual disciples of the teachers in that time period. Then it says, Avdeha, and your man servants, those are slaves, but they're indentured servitude is the kind of slavery that Judaism had. Now, yes, there were times when you quite literally owned another human being, but in Judaism, if you owned another Jew, you could only keep them for 7 years. Once that 7 years was up, you couldn't own them anymore. You had to let them go, and you had to give them a whole bunch of stuff. So you had to think real heavy about whether you wanted a servant or not. That while they were your servant, you paid them a salary, you gave them food to eat, you gave them clothing and a place to live. If you were an indentured servant, say you weren't a Jew and you were just an indentured servant, all you got was a paycheck. I'm just saying, the Jews had it made. Now they got all kinds of benefits that other people didn't get, and they were always set free. So everything was always set. You didn't have to be 7 years. You could set it up for 3. You could set it up for 1. I mean, it was just whatever deal you wanted to make. Think about Joseph when he wanted his wife. He worked so many years to earn that because that was how he paid the bride's price. But at the end of it, wasn't he being sent out with a whole bunch of stuff? Yeah, just like the Torah said. Huh, didn't that happen before that? I wonder how they knew. Anyway, our next word is va'amatcha, and female servants. Those are your handmaids, your female, the female side of what I just said about the guys. All the same rules applied. Uve hemtecha, and livestock you, so it's in your livestock. Livestock, it was beasts, so called from being unable to speak. That's why they were called beasts. Used of large land quadrupeds. Quad 4, they have 4 legs. Domestic animals, cattle. You guys know what this is, right? It signifies only beasts of burden, though, as donkeys and camels. Poetically used also of beasts of the field and wild beasts, but that's only poetically. So they're speaking of donkeys, camels, cattle, oxen, sheep. Were they beasts of burden? Mm-mm. So that's not included here. Then it says the gerha, and foreigner you, so it's saying you're foreigner. They say a sojourner, a temporary visitor, stranger, foreigner, a person living out of his own country, a foreign shepherd, a nomadic and nomadic tribes wandering about with their flocks in the land. You know, the Greek word that they used when they translated this Hebrew word in the Septuagint was proselytos. Here, proselyte? Yeah, because that's where we get proselyte, just saying. Because why would somebody be temporarily staying with you if they're not? I mean, if you're a Jew living in the land of the Jews, why would you have someone staying with you and among you if they weren't a proselyte? Oh, well, it could be working for you. Well, then that would put them up there as your manservant, right? So this is something different. Anyway, the next word is asher. It means which or that, which as in WHICH, or the word that, THAT. Then we have bish ha reha. So the sojourner, this proselyte that is within your gates. Now, I don't want you to think that it's only a proselyte. If you have somebody from, it just basically it means non-Jew, because it's assumed here that you're a Jew if you're learning the Jewish law. Just, you know what I'm saying? And so, because if you're a proselyte and you're converting to Judaism, you learn the law. Once you've learned the law, you're a Jew. You're no longer a proselyte. You're no longer what, you know. You're not a American Jew. You're not a Russian Jew. You're not a whatever. You're a Jew in their world. They didn't have this whole keeping two different identities. This was all about having one identity, Judaism. This was your religion. It was your lifestyle. It was your people. It was who you were, inside and out, up and down, forward and back, round and round. That's all that existed to you when you became Jewish. So I don't want you to think that the sojourner is just someone who's converting, because it just means that you're not, the sojourner rather, is not you like you. He's not one of you. Okay, so it's within, because it starts off with the bait, which means with or in, or within, as the case may be, your gates. It's a gate, whether of a camp or of a city or of a temple or of a place. So it can be used literally, it's literally the word gate, right? The gates of a land are the entrances of a land, places where enemies might enter within your gates. In other words, inside your city. At the gates of the city, there was the forum where trials were held. This is what we call the synagogue. And the citizens assembled, some of them for business and some to sit at leisure, to look on and to converse. The gate of the fountain, so called from the mountain Gihon. The gate of the fountain is just the entrance. It's the place where the fountain comes out. That's called the gate. The west side of the city near the foot of Mount Zion. That's all part of the fountain of Gihon. The dunghill gate. So they're talking about the literal gates that were surrounding the city itself. It says so-called the sheep gate, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, they had one that some argued was called the horse gate, the potter's gate, blah, 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 blah. You have to understand, right, that they're probably not being literal here, because what do you do if you don't have a gate? A literal gate. I don't have a gate. Well, we do have a gate in front of our house, on the entrance to the house, but not in front of our land. So they can do these things on our front yard, but they can't do them in our house? No, come on. You realize this is idiomatic. These people, these non-Jewish people who are within your gates. What's that mean? Within your authority. All right, so here's the translation. And the seventh day is a Shabbat to Yahweh, your God. Your God. You shall not take up any servile work, you and your son, your daughter, your maid, your manservant, your female servant, your livestock, and your foreigner, which is under your authority. That's what the idiom means. So the idiom is actually within your gates. So if they're within your gates, they're under your authority. If they're on any part of any piece of the land that you own, they're under your authority. If they're under, uh, if they're, let's say you've rented a building and you have your business in there and this guy works for you, that is under your authority. Now that guy can go off, can get the day off and go somewhere else and work on his own, and that's perfectly fine. Because this is about you, not him. It's about the Jew, not the non-Jew. You follow what I'm saying? So you have to close down on Sunday, or Shabbat rather. Where did Sunday come from? You have to close down on Shabbat on Saturday. He can go do whatever he wants to. And so let's look at the words of Shabbat to Yahweh. The Sephorno says that the Shabbat is a day to devote to religious service and study of sacred books. Yeah, but the children of Israel could not have done this in the wilderness since they were not allowed to leave their tents. I'm just saying. They didn't go out of their tents, remember? So how did they go to the synagogue or the temple or some other person's house to have a Bible study? It didn't happen. Then where it says, and you're foreigner. Some say that the foreigner is a non-Israelite who lives by the Noahide laws. Yeah, but keeping the Shabbat isn't one of the Noahide laws. I'm just thinking out loud here. Maimonides said that the foreigner was not allowed to work for the Yehudi on the Shabbat, but was allowed to work for himself. I absolutely agree with that. I've said that just a while ago. Others say that the foreigner is a proselyte. Yes, it is, but it's not limited to that. Now, where it says within your gates, Onkelos Shemot by Drazin and Wagner said that gate was a metaphor for court of justice, which in a post-biblical period met at the city gate. I don't know why they say post-biblical, since this practice took place during the biblical period. Still, the point is not that it was judicial. The point is those under our jurisdiction. In other words, under our authority. Close, Onkelos, but no sitar. All right, so here's word for seed. Still working on the same law here. It comes from Shemot 20:11. Let's look at two of the words here. We don't have to go through the whole thing. Vayanach is our first word, and he rested. It's to rest, to sit down, to set oneself down anywhere to take rest. The original idea lies in respiring, in drawing breath, especially to kneel down as a camel, also used of an army, locusts, bees, and inanimate things. Noah's Ark, the Ark of the Covenant, metaphorically of the Spirit of God coming down upon anyone to rest, to be at rest, especially from labor, from troubles and calamities, to reside, to remain, to be silent. Okay. Okay, where it's especially to kneel down as a camel. This is really where we need to go if we're going to understand this. When a camel master, I don't know what you call him, decides that he has to go on a journey, he takes his camel and gives it the command to go down on his knees. So it goes down on his knees. He packs all of his stuff on the camel. He doesn't have to get a big ladder and climb up the ladder and put it all up there because the camel will lay down. You load it up, you get the camel to rise up, you go on your journey. When the time comes for the man and his camel to rest, the man gives his camel the command to lie down. So when it lays down on its fore, then he can offload and maybe reload. Maybe he's trading his goods with somebody else and he offloads and he reloads, right? So during that time, that camel rests. Now, there does come a time when he needs a full rest. Maybe some of them will be short rest because there's just a real quick exchange here or there or whatever. But when it's time for the real rest, He'll lay that camel down where there's water. He'll lay that camel down right next to that water so that camel can get water. He'll offload the goods from the camel's back, everything from that camel's back, to release that camel from the pressure of the weight. And then he'll feed the animal food. He'll see to it that the animal has water. But they also take the animal by the ears and rub their ears, and they're like a puppy dog. They're very vocal and make all kinds of noise, and their eyes roll back in their head. I mean, they really enjoy this, and they talk stupid to them like we do our dogs and that kind of thing. That really has been happening for millennia, right? And so that's the idea, is that the journey has at least temporarily come to an end, and they're going to rest and respire and be refreshed. So there's your picture behind the word. Then it says Shabbat. It's almost like saying the same thing twice, isn't it? The primary idea appears to be that of to sit down, to sit still, to respire, right? So here's your translation. Because in 6 days Yahweh made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, and he rested in the seventh day. Accordingly, therefore, Yahweh blessed the seventh day, and he sanctified it. Wow, he blessed it, and he sanctified it. He purified it. Rashi and the Sepharno both say that man should show respect for God by resting on the seventh day like God did. Okay, that sounds good. Sanctified it. Casuto said he uplifted it, raising it high above the level of the other days. I like that. That sounds good to me. All right, check this out. We're ready for word 5. We've finally gone to word 5, Devar 5. The first 4 laws were concerned with our relationship with God, us and God. These next 6 will be concerned with our relationship with other humans. So we're moving on to word number 5, comes from Shemot, or Exodus chapter 20, verse 12. Literally in Hebrew it says, honor father you and mother you, that he prolong days you on the ground which Yahweh God's you gave to you. Yeah, if you think that one through, you can figure it out. Starts off with kabed, which is honor. It's to be heavy, to bear up under anything, to endure adversity, to be heavy, to be honored, to be great, vehement, plentiful, of enormity of wickedness. His wickedness was heavy, right? Used of a battle becoming fierce. The fighting was heavy. Lost my place. In a bad sense, to be troublesome, burdensome, to, how do I say that word? Indolence? I don't know. Dullness. And to any hindrance of the use of the senses, hence to be dull, sluggish. Use of the eyes, ears, and mind, not easily moved. Dull of mind, you're not listening, you're not comprehending. Dull of mind is you're not comprehending. Dull of ears, you're not listening. Dull of eyes is you're not perceiving, you're not seeing this. The next word is et. It has no actual meaning. It's just a pointer, and it points to Aviha. It's from Av, father. Aviha, your father. It's the father. It's use of a grandfather. It's of the ancestor. But in Hebrew, there's a little more to this than just your father. And I know we've already had this word in this series, but I'll bring it back up because it's been a while. The father is used of the founder or of the first. So the father of the nation is the first person who began that nation. In Bereshit, or Genesis 4:21, the father of all who handle the harp and pipe. In other words, the founder of the family of music, the inventor of the art of music. You see it right there in that verse. He's the beginner, the originating point. It's of the author. I'm the father of all the books that I've written, or the maker of anything. Rich Cultus is the father of that piece of wood there. This is Yahweh Yeshua on it. Right? He's not the father of woodworking. It's the maker of anything, especially of the creator. It's really of those who create something that's never before been seen. And in the sense, God is said to be the father of men from the notion of origin. Not so much just because he created them, but they came from him. You know, he breathed the life into them. So he is their origin. And when Yeshua was talking about calling God Father, for those of you who don't know this, he wasn't saying that God was his daddy. He wasn't saying that God was his nourishing provider. Those ideas didn't exist in his time period. What he was saying is that we're recognizing that God is the origin of all human beings. God is the origin of the Jewish covenant, because it was a Jewish man talking about Jewish things, right? So he is their origin. Father is applied to one who makes provision for anyone. Not in this time period, it's not. Except to the degree they said that of Job, because he was the father to the fatherless. In other words, he provided for them, he gave them the food that they need. He was the father to the needy, to the fatherless, to the widow, to the degree that he was a provider for them. Metaphorically, God is called the father of the righteous and of the kings of the earth, both of whom are called sons of God. The people, Yisrael as a people, are called the sons of God. Is that not exactly what Moshe was told? Let my son Yisrael come to the wilderness and worship me. So Yisrael is called the son of God. So when Yeshua called himself the son of God, he wasn't saying God is my daddy. He was saying I'm an Israelite. I'm a Jew. That's what he was actually saying. So they're called the sons of God because they're Israel. But why is that significant? They're the sons of God because Israel was supposed to be the people in covenant with God, the people who did what God did, who obeyed him like a father. Anyway, as it refers to children who do what their father and or their king does. They imitate him, which is another concept that's lost to the Western world. They don't get it because they don't know the meaning of the words. But just saying that you're an imitator of God should be a clue to the Western world that God lives by the Torah. The Torah is God's lifestyle. He lives it. It works for him. So he gave it to us because he knew if it worked for him, it will work for us. You know what I'm saying? That's all I'm saying. What I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. There's a lot to that word. Anyway, so then it's ve'et, it's and then we have a pointer to imecha, and your mother. So remember, this is about honoring your father and now your mother. Uh, yeah, it's mom and dad. Let's just leave it at that. This is lema'an, which means that. It's to designate by one's words their purpose or intent. So you say that or you say because. I generally use the word because for this Hebrew word. Then it's ya'arihun, he prolonged. If you honor your father and your mother, it's because of that he will do this. He will prolong. It's to make long, to extend, to stretch out, to be long, to prolong. So he will extend what? Yamecha. That is the plural of yom. He will extend your period of time here. He will extend. This is all, which means upon what? Ha-adama. He will extend that period of days that you're supposed to be here on this dirt. On this dirt. I think God was talking about Yisrael. I don't think he was talking about the planet. I think he was talking about Yisrael, because was part of that covenant, part of that promise. If you'll do all this stuff, I will give you this place. And if you will honor your father and your mother as part of that covenant, the time that you're here will last even longer. But it didn't last very long, did it? Because you don't honor your parents by not living according to the Torah. If you don't live according to the Torah, you haven't honored your very, very, very ancient of parents, if you follow what I'm saying. And then it says Asher, that's that word that means that, T-H-A-T. Then it uses the proper name of God. Then it says Elohecha, that's your God, right? Your God, no 10. It's where we get the name Nathan. No 10. Natan is the root. It's to give, to cause you to receive. I've had people say they were going to give me, and one guy in particular said he was going to give me a boatload of money. Well, I've never seen a boatload of money because he never brought it to me. He didn't cause me to receive that money. Yeah, you got to cause them to receive it if you give it to them. Because if you just tell them you're going to give it to them and you don't cause them to receive it, then it's just a lie. God gives you the victory when he hands you the victory, right? You win a war you couldn't possibly have won. Jews know about that, don't we? Just saying. To deliver into the power of someone else, you deliver, the state maybe delivers a prisoner into the hands of the federal government, that kind of a thing. It's used in that way. It's what you think of in giving. Lach, to you. The land that God gives to you. What land did God give to the Jews at the time was Israel. What land did God give to my wife and I? Well, it's a little acre in Bastrop, Texas, just saying. So, here's the translation. Again, we're at Shemot or Exodus 20:12. Honor your father and your mother, that he, speaking of God, prolong your days on the ground which Yahweh your God gives you. It's pretty simple. Now we jump to words 6, 7, 8, and 9, if you're reading the Christian Bible. In the Hebrew Bible, well, I don't know. They really are all, in the Christian Bible, they separate them all out. In the Hebrew Bible, they don't, because they're all basically the same thing. You know what I'm saying? So we'll get started here. We won't get through it, but we'll get started. It comes from Shemot, or Exodus, chapter 20, verse 13. Now, if you're looking at a Christian Bible, it's going to be 20, 13, 14, 15, and 16. Chapter 20, verses 13, 14, 15, 16. In a Jewish Bible, all of this is going to be found in verse 13. So the first that we're going to find is word 6. It says, Lo tirzach. Not shall murder in English. Not shall murder. There's the negative article, and then shall murder. It's NPL. It's to dash into pieces, to kill iteratively, to kill many. The act of homicide, abortion of life, murder. So if somebody breaks into your house and they're wielding a knife saying they're going to kill you and do unmentionable things to everybody else, is it murder if you kill them? No. That's self-protection. That's self-defense. It's not the same thing. If you're in a crowded room and some guy goes in and pulls out a gun and starts yelling Allah Akbar and starts shooting at people, have you murdered that person if you pull out your gun and kill him? No. If some guy has killed a bunch of people and he's on death row and he gave his life to Jesus and he changed, are you committing murder if you kill him? No. This is why you can't live by the 10 words and not understand that those are the 10 categories that subdivide into what the Jews call the 613 laws. Because the rest of it defines what everything is. If you keep reading on into the judgment, you'll find that it explains what murder is, what and how that differs from how premeditated murder is different than a crime of passion, how self-defense is not murder. All of that stuff is explained within all of this stuff. It's all the answers are here. We don't have to go and figure it out for ourselves and and go consult the works of Plato to figure it out. It's all right here in God's law if you read the whole thing and you read the judgments beyond it, right? So this is just how it breaks down. You don't commit murder. Word 7. Now, if you're Jewish, it's coming from verse 13, but if you're in the Christian Bible, because sometimes people buy Bibles and don't know what they're looking at, the next one will be 14 in the Christian Bible. It'll still be 13 in the Jewish. It's lo tin'ah. Literally, it's not shall commit adultery. So you have the negative article, then you have tin'ah, which is to commit adultery. It's used both of male and female, used of the Hebrews worshiping idols. Now, if you're not allowed to worship other idols, then you're also not allowed to have extramarital affairs. It's not the other way around. See, that's what's happened over time. This has become all about the extramarital affair and has nothing to do with idol worship. But in the Bible, it had everything to do with idol worship and very little to do with anything else. So you have to understand that you are entering into a covenant. This is the covenant. This is the moment that we are entering into the covenant. God is saying that you have to be faithful to this covenant with me. If you break this covenant and worship other gods, however that looks, by giving your money to places it shouldn't go, by going places you shouldn't be, by, you know what I'm saying? However, there's all kinds of ways to worship, by making your children's soccer game more important than obedience to the Sabbath. When those things occur, you have committed adultery against God himself. And that's way worse than an extramarital affair with your spouse on earth. Trust me, way worse. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. Then we have really no time left. We'll pick up with word 8 on our next Shabbat service. So, shalom, shalom, y'all.